All right, so I basically just wanted to do a commercial overview with you, and then maybe talk a little bit about the types of asset class that you could specialize in.
Okay.
But you know, everybody pretty much knows the big basic, you know, retail, multifamily, industrial, and office.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like all these subcategories, like underneath office, you have medical office and hospitality is under there. And then the big one now is mixed use,
Mm-hmm.
where you have either like apartment up top and retail down below,
Right.
which that's the big one that the, you know, the cities are pushing, especially like in the, you know what TODs are?
I believe so.
The transit-oriented development, where
Right.
basically they want things to be right on major bus lines and
Right,
train
right.
lines. So they're allowing developers to, you know, to have less parking because, you know, they figure people are going to take the bus and not have as many cars, but also they're allowing them to go higher. They're giving them waivers on the amount of density or the amounts of units they can put, because they want to encourage to have these kind of developments right near the train lines and things.
Right.
So the other type of mixed use that's also big, especially in the suburbs and in you know, kind of the tertiary, as they call it, is mixed use, where it's like office in the front and like warehouse in the back.
Oh.
So that's another type of mixed use. So basically, mixed use is anything that has two asset classes combined. In all of the asset classes, except for multifamily, usually owners will use outside leasing companies. And there's some agents that's their specialty, is they just lease.
Mm-hmm.
Just lease office, just lease retail. You know, some are very specific where they only do restaurants. Okay, so that's their thing, and that's kind of what they specialize in. In multifamily, usually they don't use outside. Usually multifamily is the one where you do your own leasing.
Right.
Whether you're the owner-operator or you hire a management company.
Mm-hmm.
So usually in multifamily, they're gonna, like, you know, do their own marketing. They're gonna do their own pre-screening, and part of it is just that's the tradition, but also because it's more restrictive and more chance to get in jeopardy on multifamily than on any of the other asset types.
Why is that?
Well, if you go before a judge, okay, and you're a tenant in multifamily or residential, you have lots of rights, lots of tenant rights, and the judge is going to be on your side right from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay? Where when you go between, if a commercial deal goes, the tenant and the owner are pretty much on even basis. It's not like that tenant has like that many more rights than the landlord.
Right.
What's going to decide things is what the lease says.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a multifamily or residential, they consider the landlord to be much on a different level, and they have a bunch of tenant rights because you know, they consider a tenant of a commercial building to be a lot more sophisticated, and they can afford their own attorney, and they kind of know what they were signing.
Right.
So they expect them to hold up that contract.
Okay.
Where in multifamily, you have rent control, you have like all these disclosures that you have, you know, it's a totally different thing. And when you're dealing with regular commercial, you don't have to deal with things like fair housing laws and things.
Mm.
So, you know, even though technically you're not allowed to discriminate, all these kind of things, it's like you don't have to like do all these things that you are in regular residential or multifamily.
Right, right.
Like you don't have to have the fair housing laws, you're not under the, you know, under HUD and under the state residential laws and disclosure laws and all these things, like, you know, that you are. Like commercial is just a lot, you know, more, what does the contract say, what's the income, what's, you know,
Right.
It's just black and white more,
Yeah.
and it's just a totally different thing.
It's more
So-
like the business side of it.
Yeah.
I always see it as.
So because of that, a lot of multifamily owners, whether they send it out to third party or whether they're owner operators, which means they own the property but they also run it, they want to control all of that so that they can make sure that they don't get in legal trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, So from the fact that they, want to make sure that because there's so many ways you can get in trouble with multifamily. You can't discriminate on somebody, when you're doing their credit reports. You can't, you can't charge. If basically if two people both have a 600 credit score, you can't charge this one a higher security deposit because you got a problem with them somehow.
Right.
It's like you got to have things like streamlined, and basically it's like if your cutoff is 700 credit score, that means that's it. It doesn't matter just because it's a friend. Doesn't matter because it's someone you think is, you got a better feeling about them. You're not as comfortable. You can't do all of that.
Right.
Okay. So you have to have like set criteria. You have to So what they do is they will use third-party vendors. Okay, because you can make a lease up with your attorney, but by the next year there could be a new law that could make that lease obsolete. So they're going to use an outside vendor that's going to, make sure that each year their leases are up to date, and that they're, leasing people and, all their admin people are trained to make sure that they're staying up with whatever the new law is. Okay. And if they're in certain cities that are under rent control or low income housing requirements, there's even additional disclosures and requirements that they have to abide by.
Right.
Like if you're in a regular market rent area, you can charge whatever you want as far as an increase. Okay. But if it's a rent control building, you can only do 3% per year right now. At the end of this month, it's going to go up to 4%. You can raise it up to 4%. There is another rule that you cannot increase your rent more than 10% without giving them at least 90-day notice.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like, you can do like with outside of the city of LA, that's not a requirement, but in the city of LA, that's a requirement. So they can even make restrictions on your market rent, not just your low income units. Okay. So multifamily is in some ways more management intensive than any of the other classes. Okay. That's why a lot of multifamily owners like to get out of that, sell it, and then they will buy another asset class like net lease property that is a lot less, on a net lease. The tenant's the one that pays all of the repairs, and taxes, and whatever. So sometimes you got to most of them will want to do a 1031 exchange so that they don't have to pay capital gains tax.
Right.
But if they could get into something that's a lot more of a passive investment, sometimes that's something they want.
Okay, yeah.
But the good thing about multifamily is that in a recession, you may have vacancy in your retail or your office, but in a recession, more people actually lose their homes and have to rent. So multifamily is very resilient. And unlike office and retail, where sometimes you get some of these office leases, you buy the building, but there's a 5-year lease there, and you can't do anything to change any of their terms of the lease.
Right.
So they could be way under market rent, but you can't do anything about it for 4 more years.
Right.
Where with multifamily, most of the leases are a year or less. So any of the leases that are under market, you could raise them within 6 months, 10 months. So there's a lot of ways that you can recoup your money sooner. And what most investors do is they're going to buy an apartment building that is under market rent, that all they have to do is go and do some rehab, put some nice new carpets, some, upgraded appliances, and they can raise the rent tremendously. So that's some of the advantage of multifamily. Okay. And it's also more familiar to most first-time investors. Most first-time investors, they're either going to buy a duplex, a little 5 or 6 unit, or they're going to buy a little strip center. They're going to buy something simple that's easy for them to understand. They're not going to go and buy triple net that's in another state that they're not familiar. They're not going to do anything complicated like a shopping center or anything like that. The first time, they're usually going to get something small, and then once they feel comfortable with that, they'll add to it.
Okay.
In California, a lot of first-time investors that buy multifamily will get less than 15 units. Do you know why?
No.
Okay. Anything more than 15 units requires an on-site resident manager.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So you buy a triplex, you buy 10 units, you could just put up a sign with your number and a maintenance guy or whatever, but you don't have to have someone actually there. But once you go 15 units or more, that is technically where you have to have someone that actually, they're supposed to actually live on site.
Right.
What a lot of smaller owners will do to get around that is they'll just find a tenant that already lives there, and they'll say, "Hey, do you want a discount on your rent?
Okay.
Let me put up a resident manager sign.
Right.
Here's the number. If anyone gets locked out, I'll pay you $50. If anyone has a clogged up
That's
sink,
interesting. Okay.
call our 800 number and we'll get maintenance out." So
Yeah.
you get like half off your rent or whatever. But if the city ever comes in and they ask, you're the resident manager.
Okay.
And
Nice.
they might even put the rent drop box there too,
Right.
just to make
That's
it
interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So,
very interesting.
yeah.
So when it comes to like the multifamily, since the owners and such are so involved with it, where does the agent kind of come in on the deal? Is it mainly just for the sale of the property?
Two ways.
Okay.
One is that owner may not be interested in selling that building now, but you want to get them to let you do an evaluation to evaluate the value of the property and what you could get for it, so that when they do want to sell, they call you. So that's the
Right.
first part.
Okay.
But it's also because that owner is likely to buy other properties. Okay.
Right.
So when you approach them, you got to remember that a lot of multifamily owners don't want their property actively listed. They don't want to put a sign out front and put it on LoopNet because they don't want their tenants to know the building's for sale.
Right, right.
So they want to do like what's called an off-market or a pocket listing. Okay. So basically, this is how you approach them and say, how you doing? I'm Craig with Peak Commercial. I know you're probably interested in selling, but I have a lot of buyers, for properties in your price range. So if you're ever interested in selling, I want you to know that I'm the guy that can sell this for you. And I just want you to know that this is a great property, and we understand how a lot of owners don't want their property to be active listed because you don't want your tenants to, whatever, because you don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we do for a lot of our owners is we sign a non-disclosure agreement. We find what your ideal price is. So let's just say, for example, that you would only sell this building for $3 million. Okay? So how it would work is I would only get you to agree to pay me a commission if I brought you an acceptable buyer at $3 million. I would not market it. What I would do is I would only market it to my network of investors and to the other investors that are in my office. But every single investor we bring it to, they're not going to have all your info. They're just going to have some basics, and they're going to have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, a confidentiality agreement before they get any kind of details.
Right.
And then we can put a deal together, and when you're comfortable and if you're comfortable, that's when we do a sale. And your tenants will not even know until it's like already, almost done.
Yeah.
All you need to do is just let our buyer come in and see a couple of the units or give us some pictures, because if the building is totally full, we don't need to get in there, because unlike, residential, it's like my investors just care what the income is coming in.
Right.
So basically it's like if you got a full building, that even makes it more attractive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very
So
interesting.
so basically that's how probably 75 or 80% of multifamily deals are done, where it's an off market. It's like most of the ones that you see online are kind of probably like overpriced,
Mm-hmm.
not really that attractive.
Right.
You know, the buildings that are like great shape that
Oh,
you know are
off-market.
full, a lot of those are off market, and it's like that doesn't get done until you know the deal is you know about ready to close. And then whether it's a small multifamily building or a large property, kind of how it works is the former owner will send a letter to all his tenants, and he'll let them know, you know, I've sold the building. This is the name of the new owner. This is where you send your new rent checks, and here's the new number for any maintenance. As of this date, this is the, you know, so they'll have like a close date, and then that letter will go out from the former owner, and then there's going to be a letter from the new owner also.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you know, no tenants with any sense are going to just like take a letter like random, you know, send your check here.
Right.
But when you got the both, you got the old owner, you know, saying, hey, this is legit, and the new owner, you
And then
know, with the
comes
new,
in,
yeah, that's
Okay.
so that's kind of how you do a transition.
Okay.
Now, most very small owners sometimes will manage their own properties and they live on site.
Mhm.
Okay, they are the manager on
Owner.
property.
Okay.
But most they don't.
Mhm.
They're gonna, even if this is the only property they own, if it's like 16 or above, they're gonna have an on-site manager there. And with small buildings, a popular thing is what's called a team or a manager couple.
Mhm.
Okay, where you have like the husband who will do like maintenance and you know get the they don't have that much turnover. So basically, one person can kind of keep up with the common areas.
Right.
They'll probably have a gardener do the grass and things, but this person will do like light bulbs, sweep up, that kind of thing. And they'll usually do what's called the turnaround, the turnover, when a property is vacant.
Mhm.
Like they might not do everything, like they might have a plumber, an outside vendor that does that, but they might do the painting, carpet cleaning, or carpet replacement, but they oversee the vendors coming in and out. They, you know, sign the bills, that kind of thing, and then they send them to the head office or to the owner. Okay. Now, in that situation where it's a team, then it's usually the other partner, wife or husband, whatever nowadays. But
Yeah,
basically, it's
right.
like sometimes it's the wife that kind of does the admin type thing.
Mhm.
Take the leasing calls, place the ads for
Okay.
leasing, and collect the rent check, deposits, do the ledgers. You know, just keep the books.
Right.
So no matter what size building you have, whether it's 10 units or 1,000, everything is done the same. You know, small buildings still done manually. You know, that kind of deal.
Mhm.
In newer buildings, everything is electronic,
Mhm.
and you might have a whole maintenance department with a maintenance supervisor and 4 or 5 maintenance people.
Right.
Some owners like to do things in-house. Others have as few employees as possible and use outside vendors for almost everything.
Right. That's interesting.
And the thing that you look for as an agent or asset manager or a property manager, because unless you work by salary, you have to have a real estate license to manage other people's properties. Okay, unless you're an employee. If you're an employee of the owner, you don't have to have a real estate license.
Okay.
So, property and asset management is a specialty that you can provide for owners.
Okay.
Okay, but one of the things that you look for owners is, and even as a salesperson, you should know some of the terminology and some of the things out there. Is that owners? So let's say there's no upside. That's what owners look for. They look at a property that has upside, where it's under market rent and there's some renovations you can do to bring it back to market rent. Okay. Now in office and retail, it's a class system, class A, B, and C, which C buildings, being bad locations and older buildings. But you can take a B building, not a bad location, but maybe it's kind of run down, and you can renovate that and turn it back into an A property and get prime rents again.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what if you got a multifamily that's already been redone and it's at market rate? It's like the only way you can really look at that for an investor is to find what other streams of income you can get out of that property.
Right, not just the
Okay.
basic market
Right.
rates.
So then you're looking at what's called a la carte pricing, okay? So instead of just a simple gross lease where your rent pays for your apartment and includes a parking spot and includes all the amenities. Some bigger apartments, they break all that up, and residents sometimes don't like it, but in the right locations, they don't have a choice. But it's like, so your rent will now just pay for your apartment, and parking is going to be extra per month. The amenities like the gym are not included, that's extra. The swimming pool will be extra.
So that's a la carte pricing.
That's called
when
a la
you-
carte when they break that up.
Okay.
And the way they sell it is, oh, well, if you don't use the gym, you don't have to pay for it. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, that's an extra way that owners can make money. The other is they will do they get kickbacks from in certain markets where they have a choice of 2 or 3 different cable providers. The owner will choose a cable provider that's going to give them a kickback. It's legal, but basically, who's going to pay the most for the cable service there? Okay. There's other things like the laundry room, especially in older buildings. Okay, laundry room is always a big pain as far as maintenance for owners. You know, you're always like having to empty change. It's always breaking down. You're always having to fix it. They're flooding. So laundry rooms are something that you need to provide if you don't have in unit, which most older buildings don't have in unit,
Right.
a washer dryer. So what a lot of companies now are doing is they're hiring third-party vendors where they will take over your laundry room, and then they put all new machines in, and they do like the credit card.
Like the swiping for your
right.
thing? Yeah.
And then basically you can either just rent out your laundry room and just get a check each month, or you do a split with them, like 50-50 or 60-40. But either way, you're out of the laundry business, and you let a laundry company who does that take it over.
Okay.
So those are the kind of ideas that we need to provide